My name is Harper Monroe, and tonight I'm not hiding behind anyone's lies. Tonight I end a story that was never mine to begin with. For 12 years I played the loyal wife, the steady partner, the woman who carried the house, the schedule, and the details no one else noticed. But loyalty is only a virtue when it's returned. My husband, Owen Campbell, turned it into a weapon. He thought he could split his life into compartments, his polished corporate self, his doting father image, and his secret nights with Tiffany Clark. What he never understood was that I see patterns for a living. I design campaigns, build stories, and catch the inconsistencies others miss. He underestimated the one person who watched closest. That is why I am here. Standing in the center of the apartment, he thought no one knew about. The vantage on 5th. Top floor. Glass walls. Curated furniture meant to impress a younger woman. He paid for all of this out of our joint account. Calling it an investment, he forgot that every investment leaves a trail. And I followed it straight here. Tonight this polished, soulless place is my stage. On the sleek dining table sits dinner from his favorite Italian restaurant, Candle Lee. A bottle of Cabernet already breathing. Above the sofa float heart-shaped balloons stamped with messages like "Congrats on the affair" and "Home sweet home." Wrecker. Every corner of the apartment has been marked with photographs our wedding day. Vacations. Birthdays. Ghosts of the life he gambled away for this sterile box. I hear the hum of the elevator in the hallway and steady my breath. My hands don't shake. The rage that once kept me awake has cooled into something sharper. This isn't about screaming. This is about precision. The lock clicks. Owen's voice filters through the door. Relaxed. Amused. Then he appears, his arm around Tiffany. Her blonde hair catching the light. Her laugh cutting the silence. They step inside, expecting privacy, and freeze. Their eyes dart from balloon to photograph to table setting. Their faces fall as the truth surrounds them in red and silver. I step from the kitchen, calm, collected, with a smile that doesn't reach my eyes. "Welcome home," I say, gesturing toward the table. Dinner's waiting, and I'm not alone tonight. Owen's mouth opened and closed, his confidence evaporating as he tried to make sense of the scene. Tiffany's grip on his arm tightened, her eyes darting across the walls lined with photographs of my life with him. For once, his polished corporate tone failed him. I didn't need to raise my voice. I simply looked at him and then to her, letting the silence bruise their pride. That was when the door to the bedroom opened and Miranda Holt stepped into the light. Calm. Composed. Every detail of her tailored suit announced authority. She placed a thick folder on the table, right beside the lobster ravioli and the waiting glasses of wine. Miranda's voice was steady. Professional. She explained that inside the folder were copies of the lease agreement for this apartment, signed by Owen Campbell himself, along with financial records clearly showing withdrawals from our joint account. Tiffany's eyes widened as she glanced at Owen. He tried to wave it off, muttering about a misunderstanding. But Miranda didn't pause. She laid out receipts for furniture, recurring rent, and utilities, all tied directly to him. The evidence was undeniable. The apartment wasn't a secret fling. It was a fully funded parallel life, built on stolen resources. For a moment, Tiffany looked caught. But then something shifted in her expression. Instead of shame, a small, calculating smile curved across her lips. She placed her handbag on the table, sat down in one of the chairs as if it belonged to her, and crossed her legs. Her voice, sharper than I expected, cut through the room. She admitted that this place wasn't just about romance. She said Owen had promised her more than dinners and wine. According to her, They had plans that stretched far beyond the walls of this apartment. The words sank in, twisting the air heavier. Owen's face drained of color. His attempt to hush her only confirming what I had already suspected. Tiffany looked directly at me, her tone almost triumphant, as if daring me to flinch. She claimed she wasn't simply the other woman. She was a partner in something bigger. My chest tightened. But not with fear. It was clarity. The affair was only the surface. A distraction meant to keep me from discovering what lay beneath. I steadied my hands on the back of the chair and leaned forward. "Then let's hear it," I said evenly. Refusing to give her the satisfaction of a reaction, Tiffany leaned back in her chair, her confidence growing in the silence. She spoke with the cool certainty of someone who believed she held leverage. Describing how Owen had positioned her as a fabricated client, she explained that she played the part of a new strategic partner, one whose name could appear on invoices and contracts. Money that should have gone toward actual business development was being routed to this apartment. To expensive dinners, to the illusion of a deal that never existed. Each line item masked their arrangement. A cover story polished enough to withstand casual scrutiny. Owen had used his position at Sterling Dynamics to siphon funds, and Tiffany seemed proud to confess her role in it. Owen tried to interject, raising his voice, insisting it was all a misunderstanding, that these were legitimate expenses. His protest rang hollow. Miranda Holt quietly opened another folder, revealing copies of bank transfers, invoices with Tiffany Clark listed as a vendor, and photographs of them arriving at restaurants where company accounts had been charged. Her tone never wavered as she laid the documents on the table, one by one, each a nail in the coffin of their scheme. She pointed out dates, matching them with Owen's official travel reports. The evidence aligned too neatly to be anything but deliberate fraud. I watched Tiffany's composure flicker when Miranda produced a USB drive. Caleb Ross, the investigator, had compiled surveillance stills of Owen entering this very building on nights marked as business trips. The images were time-stamped, each one paired with credit card statements from the company account. Tiffany's bravado faltered as the reality settled over her. She had been presented as a client. But on paper, she was little more than a phantom beneficiary of Owen's reckless theft. Owen's frustration erupted. He slammed his hand against the table, rattling the wine glasses. His polished executive mask cracked, replaced by desperation. He turned toward me, his voice raised, accusing me of setting him up, of destroying the very foundation of his career. But his words carried no power. He had built this entire charade on stolen resources, and now the structure was collapsing around him. I didn't need to shout. I simply reminded him that every dollar he had funneled into Tiffany's pockets was traceable, and every forged client dinner could be scrutinized by Sterling Dynamics with the right set of documents. The room thickened with his panic, Tiffany's silence, and Miranda's quiet precision. This wasn't just about betrayal in marriage anymore. It was about professional fraud, corporate misconduct, and the unraveling of Owen's carefully cultivated reputation. For years, he believed he could control every narrative. But in this moment, the narrative belonged entirely to me. I leaned forward, steady, and let the words land with the weight of inevitability. The affair was never the story. It was only the mask. The real story was theft. And now the mask had been ripped away. The evidence of financial fraud still lingered on the table. But Tiffany was not finished. She straightened in her chair, her earlier bravado returning like a shield. She said that the apartment, the money, and even the fabricated invoices were only stepping stones. Her real ambition, the reason she attached herself to Owen in the first place, was to climb into the industry where I had built my name. She looked at me directly, her voice steady, declaring that the next campaign Sterling Dynamics was preparing to pitch was going to have her fingerprints on it. The irony, of course, was that the concept she referred to was mine. Months of my work, late nights drafting visuals and strategies, were suddenly claimed as her ticket into credibility. For a moment, the room seemed to still. Owen sat rigid, refusing to look at me. His silence a tacit admission. Tiffany continued, speaking with the arrogance of someone who believed she had already won. She explained how Owen had passed along my drafts, presentations, and proposals, presenting them as collaborative efforts with her. In her mind, she was poised to become a rising name in public relations. Standing on the very foundation of my labor, it was not enough for them to drain my marriage and finances. They wanted my professional identity as well. I reached into my bag and placed a slim binder on the table. Inside were copies of the campaign drafts, each page watermarked and time-stamped. Stored on cloud drives, I had maintained long before Owen's betrayal surfaced. Every iteration, every revision, bore my digital signature. I had anticipated the possibility of theft because in creative work, plagiarism is the silent predator. What Tiffany thought she could parade as her own was already documented as mine. Secured and undeniable, I slid the pages toward her, letting her see the irrefutable trail. Her confidence faltered. She glanced at Owen, searching for reassurance, but found only his clenched jaw and the weight of his exposed deceit. Miranda Holt leaned forward, her measured tone cutting through Tiffany's silence, reminding her that intellectual property theft carried its own consequences, both civil and professional. Tiffany's ambitions, once sharp and gleaming, now looked fragile under the fluorescent light. She had imagined herself standing on a stage, presenting my ideas as her breakthrough. Instead, she sat in a chair across from me. Realizing that the very evidence she planned to wield had already been neutralized, I did not need to raise my voice. I only told her the truth. The affair was never enough. So they reached for my career. But just like everything else, their grasp had slipped. I met Tiffany's eyes, steady and unflinching. "You wanted my work," I said quietly, "but you will leave with nothing." The apartment had turned into a courtroom without walls. The evidence was laid out. The accusations hung in the air. And the silence between us carried more weight than any jury's verdict. Miranda Holt adjusted the stack of folders in front of her, her movements precise, her eyes fixed on Owen Campbell. When she finally spoke, her tone was steady, the same tone she used in hearings where outcomes were already decided. She announced that the time for discussion was over. It was time for settlement. From her leather case, she drew out a draft agreement. Crisp white pages that gleamed under the dining room light. She placed it directly in front of Owen, the document like a mirror reflecting every failure he thought he had hidden. The terms were clear. Harper Monroe would retain 70% of marital assets, the family home, and controlling interest in the joint portfolio. Harper would be granted full custody of all financial accounts tied to household management, and any remaining debts tied to this apartment would be assigned solely to Owen. It was not a suggestion. It was the price of deceit. Owen's jaw tightened, his fingers curling against the table's edge. He shook his head, muttering that the division was outrageous, that he had built his career with his own hands. He leaned toward me, his voice rising, insisting I was punishing him out of spite. But his anger no longer struck fear. It only revealed his desperation. I didn't move. I simply reminded him that every page of this draft was backed by evidence bank statements, falsified invoices, surveillance stills, even Tiffany Clark's own words minutes earlier. If he refused, Sterling Dynamics would receive the full package in the morning. Corporate misconduct would swallow his career long before divorce court ever convened. For a brief moment, I thought he might still try to fight. His eyes darted between Miranda and me, searching for weakness. But then Tiffany snapped. She slammed her hand down on the folder, her voice sharp, demanding to know where her promises had gone. She reminded Owen that he had sworn to transfer shares, to build a future where she stood beside him, not in the shadows. Her anger cut deeper than mine ever needed to. She exposed him further, her words confirming what he hoped to keep unspoken. Owen sagged in his chair, the authority he once carried in boardrooms reduced to silence. He picked up the pen Miranda had placed on the table. His hand trembled as he scrawled his signature, each stroke a concession he could never take back. The document was no longer a draft. It was a surrender. I leaned closer, my voice low but clear enough to carve through the tension. I told him he had just signed the obituary of his own empire. The man who once held every card now sat cornered, stripped of leverage, his downfall sealed in ink. The ink on Owen Campbell's signature was barely dry when the second fracture appeared. Tiffany Clark, who had been seething in silence, finally erupted. Her voice cut through the heavy air, sharper than glass. She accused Owen of stringing her along with empty promises, of dangling shares and status like jewels she would never wear. Her eyes burned with betrayal. But her fury was not directed at me. It was turned fully on the man beside her, the one who had convinced her to gamble her future on a hollow partnership. Owen tried to calm her, his tone slipping back into the polished cadence he used in boardrooms. But Tiffany was done being managed. She spat out details neither Miranda Holt nor I had mentioned. She admitted that Owen had funneled money not only from our accounts and his company but also from his mother Margaret Campbell's charitable foundation. Tiffany's words tumbled out like weapons, each one sharper than the last. She claimed he used the nonprofit's donations as another stream to maintain their lifestyle, covering travel, jewelry, even the down payment on this apartment. The room chilled at the revelation, because now the rot extended beyond betrayal and fraud. It touched public trust, family legacy, and the one name Owen had always sworn to protect. Miranda didn't waste a second. She calmly reached for her phone and pressed record, capturing Tiffany's confession in her own words. Every syllable became evidence. Tiffany realized too late what she had done, her expression faltering as the weight of her admission settled on her. By trying to hurt Owen, she had tied herself directly to the scheme. She was no longer a mistress hiding in the shadows. She was an accomplice, confessing in the open. Owen exploded, turning on her with the kind of rage he once reserved for closed-door arguments. He called her reckless, stupid, ungrateful. But the damage was irreversible. His voice shook not with power but with fear, because now both of them stood condemned. I didn't need to intervene. Their alliance was unraveling before me, shredding itself apart without my hand. Tiffany had meant to expose him, to save herself. But instead she dragged her own ambitions into the pit. The power she thought she wielded slipped through her fingers in the space of a few sentences. I rose from my chair, steady, collected. My voice was calm when I told them the truth. Neither wanted to hear. They had buried themselves. I didn't need to shout, didn't need to gloat. The room spoke for me, filled with signed agreements, recorded confessions, and the weight of 2 lives imploding. Tiffany bolted for the door, desperate to escape. Owen slumped in his chair, hollowed out, staring at the pen that had sealed his downfall. The days that followed moved quickly. The way falling dominoes never pause once the first is tipped. Owen Campbell, once the confident executive with a reputation polished to a shine, was summoned by Sterling Dynamics within 48 hours. The evidence Miranda Holt had prepared spoke louder than any excuse he could attempt. Fraud. Falsified invoices, fabricated clients. The company could not risk keeping him on its payroll. His termination was swift and silent. A career ended not with applause but with a quiet escort out of the building and a letter marked for cause. His corner office emptied into a box. His access revoked before his signature had time to dry on our settlement. Tiffany Clark faced her own reckoning. The recordings Miranda captured traveled quickly to the agencies that might have once courted her. Her name became a warning rather than a credential. Within a week, she was let go from her modest position. Her portfolio tainted by scandal she could not spin. In an industry where reputation is currency, hers was now bankrupt. She had imagined herself climbing through the doors Owen opened, but she left instead through the back exit, branded unreliable and reckless. Whatever ambitions she carried dissolved into silence. Even Margaret Campbell, Owen's mother, could not shield herself. Tiffany's outburst about the charitable foundation was not ignored. Regulators reviewed the accounts, and the discrepancies aligned with Owen's trail. Margaret's long-standing place on philanthropic boards was stripped, her name whispered in meetings as caution instead of respect. The family's social standing, once untouchable, eroded under the glare of investigation. What had been cultivated over decades unraveled in weeks. For me, the conclusion was not about spectacle. It was about balance restored. The settlement Miranda secured granted me control of the family home, 70% of the assets, and the rights to my creative portfolio. What Owen and Tiffany had tried to steal was not only returned but fortified by legal record. The court approved the terms without contest, since the evidence left no ground to argue. What had been an ambush in a sterile apartment became a permanent decree, inked into law. I saw Owen once more after the dust settled. It looked smaller, dressed in clothes that no longer carried the cut of wealth. His eyes avoided mine, heavy with shame he could not disguise. I did not need to speak. He already knew he was a man undone by his own hand. Tiffany had vanished from his orbit, and Margaret fought her own battles far from mine. None of them escaped. The story ended as it had to, with every thread tied, every mask removed, and every debt paid in full. If watching Owen's empire collapse piece by piece felt satisfying, subscribe to Revenge Ties. Each week, we bring you stories where betrayal is exposed and justice is delivered with precision. Don't miss the next downfall, darker, sharper, and even more unforgettable than the last. Join us, and never look away.
And that wraps up today's story. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and let's see how far these stories reach. If this story moved you or gave you chills, give it a like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. One last thing, rate the story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps us bring you even better ones next time. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you being part of this storytelling journey.